Okay, I guess that's enough. It's just us chickens. So let's begin, and as before, we will just start with a 3 minutes of quiet sitting.
You're muted, Gregory.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Here's the outline. This is the outline as I've labeled the sections and parts. And where we are is in the middle of section 2, part 1, section 2. I just thought I'd share this with folks for a little bit. The Waymans have it a little differently. They have chapter 1 as the first 2 sections, chapter 2 as 3 and 4 sections, and I've put, for the various reasons, the section 3 should be in with the other 3. And then they have entering the one vehicle path down here at 14 and 15, which doesn't make any sense to me. It should be here where the one vehicle section number 5 starts. So I don't know why they, oh, well, the reason they do that is because they're working off the Tibetan translation that has its own unique issues. Diana Paul, she doesn't separate it into parts. She just has the chapters. And she has the, basically she shortens the title for each chapter as to the one particular issue that's raised in that chapter. Because she is also going off of the Gunabhadra translation, as I do. Garma C.C. Chang is working off of the Ratnakuta translation that Bodhiruchi did, and that does not have any chapters, so he did not add his own. And then these are the Gunabhadra chapters in with the Chinese. And this shows that basically Diana Paul is using Gunabhadra's chapters, which are somewhat truncated to the version that I'm using, that includes the whole phrase that's in the entrustment section, beginning with the word articulating. The reason I think that's important is because it explains partly why I put these 3 sections together in part 1, because these are the 3 praising sections. And then section 4 begins where each section starts with the word articulating, indicating it's the, what we would call expounding, explication, explaining, clarifying each section. Those are all, of course, synonyms for the word articulate. So that's why I have articulating as its own section in part 2. And then all the other ones, beginning with the one vehicle, are all about the entering the way of the one vehicle. So section 5 is entrance to the one vehicle, and I take section 6 to 15 to be referring to this, the way of the one vehicle. So we have the part 5, section 5, entering the one vehicle, and then the rest of them, the way of the one vehicle. So that's just how I have looked at this organizational scheme. So we're in the section 2. We remember we've gone through section 1 was the introductory setup, the Queen Srimala's awakening on reading the letter from her parents, and then the appearance of the Buddha upon her initial 2 verses of awakening. Then when the Buddha gets there, she has the 8 verses of praise, and then the proclamation of the sign of her future Buddhahood. Upon receiving the sign and all the people there hearing it, she then makes her 10 inconceivably great proclamations. We went through the first 5, and just to point out again that they all begin with, from today henceforth until awakening. And I read into that meaning until final or complete awakening, after she's had her initial awakening. And the first 5 are about the mind's she is not going to arouse in relationship to the items mentioned. Not going to be offending towards the precepts, not have a prideful mind towards the elders, not have a hating mind or an aversive mind towards all beings, not having an envious mind towards any particular person's form or endowments, possessions. Endowments is again the mental or character, possessions of one's character or possessions or physical possessions. And then not having a stingy mind towards the internal and external dharmas, things, sharing the dharma. So now we get into the next 5, and these are a shift because they are now not oriented towards her own mind training, if we want to call it that, or mind practice. They're oriented towards social issues in relation to other people. So item or proclamation vow number 6. World honored one, from today henceforth until awakening, I do not receive animals or objects of wealth on my own or for myself. But what I ordinarily have, which is received, is wholly for the development of the poor and suffering multitudes of beings. So isn't that a great joy to hear a social leader saying what I have is will be for development of the poor and suffering multitudes of beings. I think we can all relate to that, to what a great aspiration, proclamation, vow that is that we're not going to hold the things that we receive for ourselves, but we'll share them for the poor. What's interesting, one translation interest is that in the Tibetans change what I have as the poor and suffering multitude of beings. The Tibetan's translation from the Waymans has poor and friendless. The poor and friendless. It doesn't seem to be from the Ratnakutra, because Chang's Bodhiruchi translation also has poor and suffering. So the change of suffering to friendless is something unique to the Tibetan translation.
Makes me wonder if the word friendless might have some connotation of suffering, a bigger like echo of the word suffering in Tibetan languages.
Yeah, I did read once one interesting comment about how the Tibetans translate the Sanskrit, and they don't do it in anywhere that even attempts to be literal all the time. They do try to use conceptual or symbolic relationships. I mean, it's not totally out of ordinary, but they do have an interesting way of translating. Now, what's interesting about it is they almost always use the same phrase for the same Sanskrit words, but the phrase itself isn't directly a literal translation of the Sanskrit. So unless you know the code that they use this phrase or this word in Tibetan for this phrase or this word in Sanskrit, you have to know that. It's sort of like you have to go to the Tibetan dictionary to find that out, because otherwise you can't just, like here, read friendless and know that they mean suffering.
There's something kind of moving about this friendliness, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's way off in a certain way, but it's in a certain way it's kind of moving.
Right. We will come. The Kalyana Mitra, the Dharma friend, does come up very shortly.
Right.
Number 7, world-honored one. From today henceforth until awakening, I do not practice the 4 embracing dharmas on my own or for myself, because they are all for the multitude of beings, and by means of a mind not stained by craving, an indefatigable mind, and an unimpeded mind, I include the multitude of beings. Here, the four embracing vows have a lot of different translations. This is the probably the most literal translation of from Gunabhadra. Let's see. Bodhiruchi, let's see. Waymans have 4 articles of conversion. Again, that's a process-oriented translation. Chang has the 4 inducements, and Diana Paul has 4 all-embracing acts. So she changes the word dharmas to acts. I don't know why. But what these refer to are the 4 methods how to teach the Dharma to convert beings. This is a very traditional collection of the 4.
Donna.
The only thing that's different is how they get translated the title. So number 1 is Donna, giving. The idea is to give. This is, again, it's sort of in relation to the previous vow. It's to give both physical nourishment and spiritual nourishment to people, and to give it freely without cost. And this is the best way to win people over. So this in terms of why it's called articles of conversion, meaning are the 4 inducements. It's the ways the Bodhisattva can reach out to people and present the Dharma in its best aspects and its truest aspects, not just in its best in terms of putting on a show, but in its truest. And so we have giving is not only the first paramita, it's also the first of the instructions to a bodhisattva that when we come into contact with people to talk about the Dharma, the first thing on our mind should be dana, giving what you perceive that person needs. I think that's also part of Maslow's pyramid of what do they call that, Mike? Or anybody his pyramid of
Hierarchy of needs.
Of what?
Hierarchy of needs.
Right. Yeah. Hierarchy of needs. So yeah. So this is basically the first thing is to deal with people's immediate needs. The second one, Priya Vakana. Vakana means words, and Priya means kind or pleasant or fine speech or words. So it means, again, we are to use kind, pleasant, fair, and fine words and speech when we talk to people about the Dharma. That's something that's hard for me sometimes to remember, especially when we're online. Not to call somebody an idiot for not knowing or understanding some basic Buddhist idea. The third one is Arthakritya, meaning concordant acts are
What is that?
benefiting others.
Concordant.
Yeah,
I've heard that word before, but I don't exactly know what it means.
Right. It means it means going along with, or being congruent with, or being together with.
Yeah, right.
Understanding what the person means. It has 2 connotations. One, it means that our own acts are concordant with
Right.
the Dharma, and also that we act in a way that's concordant with the people that we're talking to
Right.
in order to give them the benefit of what we're trying to communicate. And the fourth one is samana arthata, that artha in the middle of it means basically means the meaning. Arthata turns it all into a noun like shunyata, the ta suffix. Samanartha ta means leading all beings to virtuous roots and deeds by example, working together. It's a long-winded meaning. It's not just what the words mean, but it means sama means the same or together, and artha means meaning. So the literal word is having the same meaning, but it's talked about as leading all beings to virtuous roots and deeds by examples working together. So that we have to set an example. So these are the four traditional ways that have been taught as how to talk to people about and teach the Dharma.
Can you remind me number 2?
Number 2 is kind speech. So giving kind or pleasant speech, acting in concordant with what it is we're talking about, and acting, leading people by our own example. And the third one again is concordant with. Concordant means the words of the Dharma fitting with what we perceive the people to be needing. It's almost a way of upaya, in the sense of using the means that are directed towards the audience that we're speaking to. And then the fourth one is when we do all of these, we we're leading by example,
Right.
not just by words, that we're teaching the Dharma by example. This term stain is interesting. It's going to come up a whole lot more. So since this is the first time it's come up, by means of a mind not stained by craving. So that is, again, let's see if I can. Basically, the word stain is a word that is also a Sanskrit word that has multiple translations. It can mean rakta or klesta. Klesa is afflictions. Klista is a stain. And sometimes it's called to dye, D-Y-E, stain, defile, contaminate, pollute, infect, are sometimes called lust. I like to choose, I've specifically chosen the word stain rather than to defile or contaminate or pollute. Most commonly, you'll see the word contaminated or polluted by. But I say stained by because stain has what I think is the appropriate ambiguity in the term. A stain can be like a coffee stain on a coffee table. But as our expert woodworker knows, a stain can also be deliberately applied for beauty. And so I like the word stained that way because it has both applications rather than just
I like the word stain too, Gregory. I think maybe I've gotten it from some text, but also almost, and you'll understand what I mean by almost a synonym with perfume in the sense that
Right.
there's something left there that that reminds you and shows you something, you know.
Exactly. And perfume is also,
It's also used in the right.
yeah, it's a different word. It's vakana, but it also is neutral, because you can have a really wonderful smell that's perfume, but it can also be rather the perfume of a skunk, you know, the eau de cologne of Pepe the skunk. So yeah, that's what. So it's very similar. So the three things, there are basically three things that are imprinting the mind or the unconscious from the Buddhist perspective. One is stain, one is perfume, and the other is seeds, the bija. So it's by this combination of stain, perfume, and seeds that that the Buddhist psychology developed to explain how memory works, and the functioning aspects of memory and habit formations, and what we would call our in Western psychology complexes.
Gregory.
Yeah.
I'm lost. Where are you on this page? Number?
Number 7.
Thank you.
So where am I?
One of our, is it the Heart Sutra where it says not stained, not pure?
Yeah,
Okay.
right. And that again is the similar one. The other thing before I move on stain I wanted to mention is the system of 8 consciousnesses. The first 5 are the sensory, what I call the perceptual sensations. What do they call that? The perceptual nervous system? I forget the word.
Are you talking about sight, smell, taste?
Right. Those
Yeah.
are the what we call the 5 senses. Buddhism, of course, says mental faculties is the 6th sense,
Right.
and calls that mano vijnana. Mano is the combined form of the word manas, M-A-N-A-S. And so we have manas and mano, and I translate that as mental, or mentation, or it could also be cognition. Some people will translate mano as mind, but I keep that as the translation for the word chitta. But interestingly, the 6th consciousness is mano vijnana. The 7th consciousness is also called klista mano vijnana, which means the stained mental consciousness, and are sometimes just stained mentation, klista manas. And what's fascinating about that is it recognizes that the 7th consciousness, sometimes it's called ego consciousness, but I think that's too one-sided, because the stain of the 7th consciousness is the fundamental polarization or bifurcation of consciousness. So it is what the idea of a subject or ego is based on, is that fundamental polarization. But the ego can't exist without the objectification. The subject can't exist without the object. And so it's at this level, the 7th consciousness, they call it the stained mental consciousness, because it's between the undifferentiated 8th consciousness of our unconscious and the differentiated 6th consciousness of our perception. And so it's in that movement that that bifurcation takes place, or what we call the fundamental dualization or duality arising in the mind at that level. And so there's, this, you could go on for hours. I could go on for an hour on this point, but I just wanted to point out the relationship between the word stained and how it's used in these different dimensions. because we're here at this first one, by these four embracing dharmas. This is how we will be able to share the Dharma without being stained by craving. It will also give us an indefatigable mind, a mind that's not well, let's look at the other translations. Diana Paul says, without satiation. The Waymans say, never unsatisfied. And Chang is never weary. And then an unimpeded mind. It's interesting. Paul has without prejudice. Waymans have not retreating. And Chang has is free from hindrances. So I think is free from hindrances is Bodhi Ruchi's personal, because Waymans have not retreating, which is more like the unimpeded mind, and that from the Tibetan. And Diana Paul, for some reason, has without prejudice as basically her interpretation of what could impede the mind, our prejudices. But be that as it may, those are the four ways of embracing and sharing the Dharma, keeping clear of these three kinds of mind, and in that all beings are included without exception. Number 8, World Honored One, from today henceforth until awakening, if I see the suffering multitude of beings who are lonely, confined, bound, obstructed by diseases of every type, in difficulties and destitute, then to the final end, I do not even briefly reject them, and certainly desire their peaceful rest, that by the use of the benefits of meaning, they are made released from the multitude of sufferings. So only afterwards will I renounce. And then I have in brackets life.
Gregory, there's the word, the what you might call them, the Waymans used friendliness there, and you did it loneliness,
Right.
in this part.
Because
But
I'm
it's the same word that's you were saying it's suffering.
well, this is the thing. I don't know. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's how the Waymans translated. In the one sense, they translated suffering as friendliness, and then here they've translated different words as friendliness, right? So I have no idea if it's the Tibetans or the Waymans who are causing this sort of ambiguity. What were you going to say, Carol?
Are you talking about friendlessness or friendliness?
What they say, friendless. Yeah,
Friendless, right?
right. Here they say friendless.
I heard friendly too, and it was not making any sense at all. Thank you, Carol. I was
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
consternated.
Yeah. So in number 6, they have suffering as friendless, and in number 8, they have what was the actual word that they have?
Aloneness.
Yeah, lonely beings who are lonely. That's good. And so in one case they translate what I would see as what Gunabhadra has as the word suffering, in one they translate as friendless. And then in what Gunabhadra has the word I translate as lonely, they also translate as friendless. So we don't know if that's them or if that's the Tibetan that they're working from in both.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The last sentence in this, so only afterwards will I renounce life. Is this the first place that we see in the sutras where we learn that bodhisattvas don't leave until all can leave?
I don't know. I can't say it's the first place in sutras. I think it might, there's so many Prajnaparamita sutras. It
Right.
might be there in one of them as
I
well.
was challenged the other day. I can't remember on what. I said, well, what about the vow to save all beings? I'm not going to bail out until then. And this seems like that's what they're saying here as well.
Yes, that's right.
And that is a pretty fundamental Mahayana one vehicle vow.
Yes, right, exactly. Well, it begins with the bodhisattva ideal as different than the arhat ideal, and so we can say it begins with the Prajnaparamita second turning that establishes the bodhisattva ideal. But again, this is in relation to it. The part here that's a little different is it's not just about it's helping people to awaken, leading them to awakening, but it's also in the meantime trying to attend to their sufferings, that being lonely, being confined or bound or obstructed by diseases and difficulties and destitute, and essentially not rejecting people and trying to bring them to rest and some kind of liberation. So this is the first place we come across the word renounce, and this is going to again be very important in the next two sections. And basically what it means here is which is why I added to renounce. I will not, only afterwards will I renounce life, because it means basically leaving this life, dying.
Gregory, the Waymans, he said, I shall leave them. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, only then will I leave them, leave people. And that means, will I die? Will I
Oh, I see.
Will I renounce life? Will I leave this life?
I see.
Are you talking about life or reincarnation and the wheel of the Dharma?
No, just talking about the one life that we have. She's basically saying, I'm not going to give up this life until I've brought every person to suffering that I can. Now, of course, that's out of our hands, but the point is, in terms of the sense of personally renouncing the life.
That's not all right. That needs clarification, because I don't understand it that way. I never have understood it that way. We all are going to die, and we can't save everybody before we do. And so what we don't do is disappear into nirvana and get off the wheel.
Right. That's one interpretation, and it's a valid one. But what I'm suggesting, from what I would consider one vehicle Zen, if you will.
That's what I want you to clarify.
When we waken up, we say with the Buddha, I and all beings and the great earth are awakened. So that's how I view this fundamental question in terms of henceforth, until my complete awakening, I won't give up this life. And the bookend to that is, we know from the Tathagata's declaration upon awakening and with the morning star, when we fully awaken, we, together with all beings in the earth, are awakened. So that changes the whole time on the wheel scenario or frame of reference. So I think basically what I'm saying is we have to kind of go back and forth between those two frames of reference. One is within the time and space, and the other one is timeless and spaceless and the unborn and undying realm. So that's the way I take why it seems like it could be a little ambiguous, but it's resolved by that sense of when all beings are awakened, then I can renounce my life. And if it means going through multiple lives for me to get to the point where I see all beings as awakened, then that's what'll happen. If not, then not.
Well, it sounds like weasel words to me.
Well, okay.
I'm still wrestling with it too, but it's a good wrestling match. I can hear San Tzu Nim at one point saying some version of like, with a student asked him about the saving all beings and waiting for bodhisattvas, and he said some version of like, you're being very precious about it. I'm going to save all beings right now. And he said, there I go. I've saved all beings. Everyone is fully awakened right at this moment. And then went off to some kind of like comments about work to do or so. I don't remember it. It was
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it's really
it's
two
like
sides
an
of the same coin.
inspirational kind of a view.
What? What kind of a view, Danielle?
Well, it's a kind of a vow kind of a view, and inspiration in the sense of that Gregory is taking it. I don't know if it's the right word, inspiration, but like we were talking on Wednesday about seeing through, the one who sees is the same as it can be equated to not born, not dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is less clear, but
So
I will admit that this particular paragraph feels impenetrable, like an obtuse block of obsidian or something, and I feel like I'm hammering at it. That's what it feels like in my head. Sorry, Gregory, you were going to say something.
no, yeah, it's basically it's talking about the first noble truth, suffering, and that the bodhisattva vows to attend to the needs and the distresses and the sufferings of beings until all beings are relieved, are released, liberated, freed from dukkha.
It says here that by the use of the benefits of meaning, they are made released from the multitude of sufferings. Only afterwards will I renounce life.
Right.
I don't see anything ambiguous about that at all. It seems very plain, straightforward. The bodhisattva does not leave this world or the world of beings. It's not.
What I'm saying is ambiguous is only in the interpretation of whether that is to be understood within the framework of time or outside the framework of time.
Okay. Well, we talk about the arousing of bodhicitta, the desire to save all beings. It's fundamental, and this goes right at the heart of it. And I don't really like the escape clauses getting built into it. Well, we're really talking about something not real, not literal, and I think
quite literal.
Well, yeah.
And I will say that I will say that I think that that's part of it. Is there are sometimes when like that bodhisattva vow can kind of take my breath away, and I can feel the magnitude of the suffering, and I look at like, crap, why the hell would I want on this wheel one more time? Holy shit, no. Let me get off of this as fast as possible. So I think there is a real generousness of heart that's in that,
My first experiences with Buddhism was encountering that I recall seriously was wrestling with the Four Great Vows and whether I could even say them. You know, every week in the Zendo, they'd say these outrageous things, and I didn't know that I could make such a vow, and it was very, very troubling and disturbing to me. And eventually, somehow or another, it went in as a deep vow, and I don't really like, I'm not clear on why anybody would want to water that down and say, well, it's really outside of time or something. I don't know.
I remember, once talking to Dave, to John Tarrant, maybe it was both of us telling, but the way I put it, was like, John, I don't know if I have the possibility of pushing a button and I'll be totally free. I wonder if I wouldn't push that button, I mean,
Yeah.
this is 20 years ago,
Oh, that's good though. That's a great, that puts it in perspective, real talk. Keep going, yeah.
Right, so it's like, and here we're taking vows that we're promising not to do that. And I can dig that. I mean, it's like, I just wanted to tell him that, it's very tempting to press the button, and not say, oh, I'm going to stay. And I remember him saying many times too, that we take vows that are really impossible. And that's what, and we just take them. It's like Shohako Okamura has that book, Living by Vow. It's quite a beautiful book. And so it's both things, and I think that's what maybe Gregory's saying by ambiguous. It's taking the high stance from the non-linear, non-time existing world,
Right, and here it is. There's the Four Great Vows right there in paragraph 8.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Vow to wake all the beings.
Right. So my response to you, Carol, was basically just a response to the issue of, being on the round of the wheel of life through rebirth after rebirth. Because if we take it, there's a funny story, if we take it literally, the bodhisattvas will all be crammed at the door, saying to each other, you first, you first, you first.
I've seen that joke, yeah.
Yeah. So
That is funny, Gregory. Thank you.
so this is
Go after you.
yeah, right.
Chippendale, the chipmunks. Yeah. No,
Right.
after you, no.
Right.
Then they'd have to hold hands and jump through the crack together.
Right.
Maybe
Exactly.
into a pool of water. Maybe that's what those 16 were that jumped in the water. They're the last
Right.
16 popped in the water.
Okay, let's go to the next, number 9. As you noticed, and as Daniel mentioned earlier last week, each one gets a little longer.
Yeah.
Number 9. Well, honored one, from today henceforth until awakening, if I see the multitudes in wicked occupations, such as the catching and keeping of animals, as well as the various offenses against the precepts, then to the final end, I do not abandon them. And at the time I gain power, and at all those places I see the multitude of beings. Those who should be subdued are then subdued, and those who should be included are then included. Because why? Because by means of subduing and including, the Dharma is allowed to long abide. The heavenly beings and humans become completely full of that which is the Dharma long abiding, and wicked ways diminish to few. That ability to turn the wheel of the Dharma is from the Tathagata, and then one is able to continue the turning. Because to see this is beneficial, and saving and embracing of beings are because to see this is beneficial, the saving and embracing of beings are not renounced. That last sentence might need a little punctuation help, but that's the gist of it. So it starts off with wicked occupations, which is interesting, such as the catching and keeping. And I've inserted in of animals there too. That's what they're talking about. What's
The
interesting,
Waymans talk about pigs.
yeah, they remove the idea of catching and keeping per se. They say dealing in pigs. So I don't know why the Tibetans seem to have focused it just down on dealing with pigs. Maybe it has something to do with rules in Tibetan where catching and keeping and dealing in birds and dealing in other animals they didn't want to suggest was offensive, but they could only go so far as to say dealing in pigs was offensive. But be that as it may, pigs isn't in the Gunabhadra version, and it's also not in the what do you call it? The Chang's version. Let's see. Oh, the other point, one issue I wanted to raise is, so he talks about all these various issues, precepts. So even the idea is even when seeing people doing offensive things, we don't get offended at their doing offensive things. We still need to not abandon these people and everybody. So that's the gist of this, to me, is what she's, what the vow is here. It's where even don't abandon the losers, the deplorables. We don't abandon the deplorables. We try to find a way to include them. When I gain power, that's again spiritual power, if we want to call it that, or the effectiveness of the way. Power, we might recall, is I think it's the 9th paramita. When there's 10 paramitas listed, I think power is the 9th one.
Bala, right.
Yeah. And so then in all those places that I see the multitude of beings, those who should be subdued are then subdued, and those who should be included are then included. By means of subduing and including, the Dharma is allowed to long abide. So that's really basically a way of saying the way that we continue the Dharma is really a transmission from person to person. And it's a transmission that is responsive to people. And the subduing is basically really, we're talking about subduing ignorance and subduing bad habits of ourselves and responding to others. Diana Paul has restraining and assisting.
And the Waymans say destroyed.
Yeah, destroying and fostering.
Right.
And then Chang has subduing and embracing. So even though Chang is working off of Bodhiruchi, Bodhiruchi and Gunabhadra are aligned with using the word subduing, and Paul changes that to restraining, and the Waymans have that as destroying. So again, that seems to be, for the Waymans, a Tibetan take on it, because they're talking about destroying afflictions, destroying obstacles and hindrances, whereas the other is subduing it. And it means both subduing people in the sense of subduing
What should we destroy?
our ignorance, afflictions, and habits. It doesn't mean locking them up, of course, subduing and putting them in chains that way. And then, because it's a tandem thing. It's subduing and including, subduing and assisting, subduing and fostering, subduing and embracing. all those aspects of, it's basically bringing people into the fold in that sense of including all beings. And this is part of its inclusion part is again the one, definitely the one vehicle aspect of including all beings and excluding none. Mike, you might want to mute yourself when you're adjusting your camera because it makes a very weird scratching sound. Thanks. Heavenly beings and humans, of course, that's the devas and humans, become completely full of that which is the Dharma, long abiding. And the wicked ways then diminish to few. And then this, the ability to turn the wheel of the Dharma is from the Tathagata, and then one is able to continue the turning. I like that. It's a very interesting, it's sort of almost an aside, or but it's addressing this whole issue of subduing and including is what the turning of the wheel of the Dharma is about. And it's a recognition here that it comes from the Tathagata. It comes from that which comes forth as thusness, suchness. And then we, as people, are able to continue the turning. But I like it as a very much unselfish or unego way of looking at the turning of the wheel. It's not just us turning the wheel on our own. It's the ability comes from the wheel of the Dharma being turned from the Tathagata perspective, and then we are able to continue the turning. Because to see this as beneficial, meaning to see everything above is to the benefit of beings, the saving and embracing of beings are not renounced, meaning, again, we're not going to give up on saving and embracing all beings. We'll do that as long as we can. So those four are, again, relating to beings who are doing odd things, wicked things, violating the precepts, people in their suffering, and people that we're trying to teach the Dharma to or share the Dharma with. This number 10 here is now a transition. It sums up all 10 of the vows and then becomes the springboard or the diving board into everything that comes next in terms of the sutra. World honored one, from today henceforth until awakening, I accept the real Dharma, and to the final end will not forget or neglect it. Because why? Those who forget and neglect the Dharma, by that standard, are forgetting the great vehicle, the Mahayana. Those who forget the great vehicle, by that standard, are forgetting the crossings over, the paramitas. Those who forget the crossings over, by that standard, do not desire the great vehicle. If bodhisattvas are not those who are firmly resolved in the great vehicle, by that standard, they are unable to attain the desire to accept the real Dharma. They actually follow the entering of enjoyments and are forever not worthy of surpassing the state of an ordinary fellow, which, as I see it, is an immeasurably great error. And also, I see that they have not yet come to accept the real Dharma. So this is charged with a lot of new words and ideas that are basically the transition from the bodhisattva vehicle to the one vehicle through this recognition of this term, accept the real Dharma. Let's see if I can change the screen here. Uh-oh. Okay, I didn't mean to do that directly. Let's go back to here.
Let's just talking.
this this is my glossary. What we're looking at now is my glossary to the my translation of the sutra, and I'm going to go up to where it talks about this phrase. This deserves some attention because this is the core phrase of this sutra.
Real Dharma.
To accept the real Dharma. Sad Dharma Parigraha. The four characters may be translated as to accept the real Dharma, acceptance of the real Dharma, accepting the real Dharma. It could be embracing the true Dharma. What do we have here? The
Illustrious doctrine.
Right, yeah. The Waymans have this, they call it the embrace of the illustrious doctrine. So they translate sad as illustrious, and they translate Dharma as doctrine. Of course, I have a very distasteful feeling about translating Dharma as doctrine. I think that is too narrow. Paul has true Dharma, Chang has true Dharma, I have real Dharma. The word sat, it's sad Dharma, and it's the root is sat, but when the T connects to Dharma, it changes to a D in the conjunction sad Dharma. And it literally means being or existing, real, actual, true, good, or right. So sometimes sometimes it's translated as the good Dharma, or the true Dharma, or the real Dharma, the actual Dharma, the genuine Dharma. Those are all what I would call valid translations. The illustrious, it gets to be the illustrious Dharma doctrine again because of the Tibetan. You see in the Japanese translations of Sad Dharma, as we remember, Sad Dharma is the beginning of the Sad Dharma Pundarika Sutra, the lotus of the true law, when it gets translated as law instead of Dharma. But it also is sometimes translated as wondrous law, myoho, myo meaning wondrous, and ho meaning Dharma. So that's sort of the way that I see that Waymans getting to illustrious doctrine. They've taken the translation of Sad Dharma and using it, the Sat, as myo, or wondrous or illustrious. But the literal translation is more either the good or the right Dharma, or true Dharma. The parigraha means to accept, receive. It refers to anything received or the act of receiving. It also has the connotation of comprehending meaning to grasp or hold it all. So that's the sense where it also means to embrace, as the Waymans have it, to embrace the illustrious doctrine. It could, I have it to accept because I'm emphasizing more we're receiving and accepting it as true suchness, rather than reaching out and grabbing it as a thing, or holding it as a thing or an object. So that's a nuance in why I chose the word to accept. Interestingly, this 4-character phrase here, Sadharma Pundarika, the 4 characters here highlighted in the Chinese, is repeated more often than any other phrase in this sutra. It's that the 4-character phrase is repeated more often than the phrase one vehicle. So that's a way of emphasizing how key it is to unlocking the gateway for entering the one vehicle. because it's presented here as her 10th summation vow, and it also becomes the whole title for section 4 is articulating the acceptance of the real Dharma. And section 4 is the second largest section in the sutra. So we see really the importance of this phrase can't be underestimated in the importance of it in this sutra. It is also a key term that comes directly from the Prajnaparamita sutras, which is where this phrase in this Saddharma Parigraha appears. It's also called Buddha. I think in one it's related to the similar term. I think it's Buddha Parigraha, to accept the Buddha. The importance, let's see if there's any other notes here. So because this whole this proclamation vow and the whole other section on accepting the real Dharma, it underscores that this is not contrary to the Prajnaparamita Bodhisattva vehicle, but it includes it. And the Bodhisattvas, well, I jump ahead here, but it gets to the idea that all the Bodhisattvas and all the Bodhisattva vows are summed up in this one 4-character phrase, to accept the real Dharma. Some of the other translations here, the Waymans have, again, to embrace the illustrious Dharma. Paul has acceptance of the true Dharma. Chang has embraced the true Dharma. Hoshin translation has embracing the complete teachings of reality. Where this Guillaume has accept the correct Dharma. Rulu has accepting the true Dharma. So you see that most of them have embracing or accepting, which are all valid translations of that first term. But you get the complete teachings of reality, the illustrious doctrine, are some of the odder translations in my mind. But the true Dharma, the real Dharma, are to me the more correct or valid translations of Saddharma. So go back to, where are we? Oh, the next issue here is my translation of the Paramitas as crossing over. This is, again, I think, admittedly my unique rendering of it, because it shows up here in Gunabrahdra's translation. It shows up in 2 ways: a 3-character transliteration, parami, which leaves off the 4th character, ta. And then it has the single character that's used for paramita in the Chinese translation. So it both shows up as transliteration and translation. What I have here for the crossings over is because the paramita, the word paramita, literally means the other side, the far side, or the other side. So I want to emphasize the verb nature of the paramita.
But I thought we were already standing on the ground.
Yeah, well, most translations use the term perfection. Like prajna paramita is the perfection of wisdom. But I translate it as the crossing over by wisdom, because it's the practice. Paramita is the practice. It's not a when it's translated as perfection, it means the state of having arrived to the far shore, the opposite shore, and arriving at that state of perfection.
Aitken calls it the practice of perfection.
The practice of wisdom or the practice of perfection?
No, the paramitas, he calls, his book on the paramitas calls him the practice of perfection.
Right, which I think is sort of it's highlighting the two sides in one phrase, because to me the paramita is the practice, and if we say the perfection of in the way that the artist is or the cabinet maker or the translator is always striving for perfection and is always engaged in the perfection of the practice. But I just always worry that the perfection of wisdom, I want to emphasize the practice aspect, because it's for both our own crossing over and for helping other people cross over. And so to me, it keeps the literalness of the word paramita as meaning the far shore or the far side. Going to the far shore or going to the far side, because it's really it's that part of crossing over from that I like. I think the word emphasizes, and we just talk about it as perfection. It's more like it doesn't have that travelocity to it, that sense of traversing or crossing across the river that.
And
the raft, going across to the other shore on the raft has so that's why it's unique to me to translate it literally that way, but that's what I do.
I keep feeling that koan line, as you cross the bridge flows that way.
Right? Yeah, that's fun. That's a good what do you call it? Association. Yeah. And then she goes into those who forget that this is all about crossing over, all about the paramitas, are not really people who are desiring the great vehicle. So it's really an affirmation of the paramita practice and the bodhisattva vehicle practice. So it's a doubling down that this is not different than the bodhisattva practice, but it's just a way of focusing or framing. We could even use the modern term repurposing the bodhisattva practice of the paramitas in this way, focusing that they are all about this one term, to accept the real Dharma, to embrace the true Dharma. Because if it's not about embracing the true Dharma, then even though you think you're following the paramitas, and even though you think you're entering the practice of the great vehicle, you're really just entering enjoyments, and you're not then worthy of surpassing the state of the ordinary fellow. And again, this surpassing the state of the ordinary fellow is crossing over it. But then again, as we know, looking down the road, crossing over means that the ordinary fellow and the Buddha are seen for where they are consonant. The commonality of the two is, in fact, crossing over. Surpassing the state of the ordinary fellow is seeing that the ordinary fellow is Buddha by nature. It's not like getting rid of the ordinary fellow. But it all comes down to they've not yet come to accept the real Dharma. So her 10th one is proclamation is the summation of it all, as in these 4 characters. What we have is 3 words to accept the real Dharma.
So if I hang out with that from my micness, I would look and say, when you know the true Dharma intimately, like you know your own breath, as one vehicle that includes everything, that's the alignment of all of these other things lead up to that. But to just do paramitas without that is, playing games or playing with sandcastles on the beach or something.
Yeah, some of it. Yeah, that's good. Just that idea that I think the focus is this whole idea of embracing, accepting, manifesting, realizing that the real Dharma is the true Dharma, the correct Dharma is what it's about. I like the term manifesting as well as accepting, but yeah, it's that idea that it all boils down to whether we make it alive.
So I'm feeling echoes of Jiao Cho and Nan Xuan when Nan Xuan was polishing the tile and trying to turn it into a mirror. If I look at paramitas as polishing or trying to cross over somewhere.
Right. Yeah. But that's you got the 2 people wrong.
I don't think so.
It's Nanyue and Matsu and his teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're usually righter than me. I'm still convinced I'm right, though. So I got to go find the true Dharma.
Yeah. Nanchuan and Zhao Joshu, they had the shoe on his head. It was the ordinary way, the ordinary mind. Daniel remembers it more than I do in terms of the koan, where Nanchuan gives him the teaching on the ordinary mind. And it was Matsu who was just the phenomenal meditator. And then the teacher heard about him and knew that he was ripe and went and started scratching the tile where he says, "What's going on?" He says, "I'm turning the tile into a mirror," and woke him up. Okay, so then we get to the conclusion of this section here. The immeasurable blessings and benefits of Bodhisattva Mahasattvas is because of proclaiming these great proclamations. So these are Srimala's final words after her proclamation. And I just have a little asterisk there because there's just a little Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. The word Bodhisattva means enlightened being. Mahasattva means great being. And basically, the greatness of the great being is specifically being great in heart, great in compassion, being able to deliver and liberate people from their suffering. So that's why we see the term Mahasattva attached to Bodhisattvas, that they are the Bodhisattvas who have achieved or manifest or present that greatness of heart and compassion. The chief of the Dharma, the world-honored one, is present as my witness. Although the Buddha, the world-honored one, is present before me to witness and knows, yet the various multitude of beings whose virtuous roots are tiny and thin might arouse a net of doubts by means of the 10 great proclamations, because they are extremely difficult to measure up to. So I think that's a fun acknowledgement.
Yeah, they're hardcore.
In the story here, that Queen Srimala realizes, these are the proclamations I'm making, but I realize that people may think that this is may arouse a net of doubts that anybody could, even me, could actually do this. But the Buddha is my witness, she says. So don't take it lightly that I'm saying this. The Buddha is my witness. Others might long endure darkness with neither meaning nor reward, and not gain peace and joy. This long endure darkness is is a reference to the many unmeasurable rebirths, but lives in rebirth, as well as the enduring of darkness within this life. And so we may long endure darkness and not find the meaning nor a reward, and not gain peace and not enjoy. Remembering this word endure is the word saha. So when we say this is the saha world, this is the world of endurance. And basically that's the reference to this. It's a world of endurance where we endure darkness and ignorance until we discover the meaning. So for the purpose of the peace of others, and now in front of the Buddha, to articulate a sincere oath, I proclaimed these 10 proclamations. So that which articulated is practiced. So I like this emphasis that we're not just articulating it, we are practicing it, and we're proclaiming it with the Buddha as our witness. Now this term sincere oath is interesting, just in the translation bit. Paul has my vows, to declare my vows are sincere. Chang has to make this sincere declaration. So that shows that both Gunabhadra and Bodhiruchi have the same translation. Again, we have the Waymans adding the Tibetan take on it. They say to perform this blessing of truth, because the term blessing of truth in Tibetan Buddhism has a particular connotation, or it calls up a particular thing, a particular ritual that they call the blessing of truth. I don't know where, how much that comes from just the Tibetan Buddhism, or how much it was in Indian Tantric Buddhism. But it definitely is something that comes up after the Ratnakutra translation, because Chang, using the Ratnakutra translation of Bodhiruchi, has make this sincere declaration, which I have as to articulate a sincere oath. So I kind of just don't, I gloss over personally what the Waymans say about this being a particular reference to a particular form of the blessing of truth, and just focus on the sincerity of the oath, and that she's declaring, how could I not be sincere, because I'm taking this practice, I'm making this oath of these 10 great proclamations in front of the Buddha as my witness. Because of this use of this oath from within the great multitude, at this time and place will rain heavenly flowers and produce heavenly wondrous sounds. So there she's saying, I'll put it on the line. If my oath is sincere, the heavenly flowers will fall and the heavenly wondrous sounds will be made. I like that. This is the Zen masters, of course, they would say, if it's not sincere, my eyebrows will fall off. But it's the same sort of thing. And again, at that time, the words being articulated, heavenly flowers were produced, and wondrous music was expressed from within the empty sky to rain on the multitude. So again, we love this, from within the empty sky. Again, it's the reference to this shunyata and emptiness, and that these wonderful heavenly flowers and wondrous music are expressed from within the empty sky and rain on the multitude. By association, I would, of course, have to call up the flowers falling in the Vimalakirti Sutra on the appearance of the Deva there as well. Of course, there the flowers falling were put to a specific teaching moment about why they did not stick on the bodhisattvas, but did stick on the arhat disciples. But here it's just the teaching of the flowers and music are that they affirm that her vow was sincere. And the Buddha then says to affirm it also. So it is indeed. Your articulation actually is without a difference from true reality. This term true reality is Bhuta Tathatta is one it could be true suchness, or as one it's not the technical Chinese characters for true suchness, but that true suchness is another variation for how this term is translated. The the other thing I think is fun is to think of that my association is when it says the wondrous music heavenly flowers were produced and the wondrous music was made. I look at that as almost as a conscious up for me, whether it's a totally free association or not. This term of the insentient preaching the Dharma, because when this happens, when the heavenly the empty sky opens up with wondrous heavenly music, again, it's that sense of everything is seen to be making the wonderful sound, this wondrous sound, this teaching and preaching of the Dharma. The heavenly flowers, to me, is again, it's like each pixel of color that we perceive is a heavenly flower. And each, I don't know, what's the equivalent in music? Note. Each note of sound that we perceive is the wondrous music of the Dharma. And so that to me is how intensely and vast that fun little phrase, heavenly flowers were produced and wondrous music was expressed. The others saw the wondrous flowers as well as heard the sounds of music, and the entire multitude realized the total eradication of doubt and confusion. They leapt with joy immeasurable, and then brought out their words of resolve to persevere with Srimala and to always share together the realization identical to the actual practice. The world-honored one, without exception, knew the sign for everyone in the great multitude, and thus their actual resolve. So I love this phrase. Again, it emphasizes the realization identical to actual practice. Again, this emphasis on practice is important. I like also the idea that they leapt with joy, immeasurable, and then brought out their words to resolve. I think it's great that this is, it's not the restraint of this leaping with joy. Really, to me, it's something I don't think talked about as much as should be and could be in terms of Kinsho. I think if we are talking about, sometimes you hear people discuss, well, how do I know that my experience was a Kinsho, or how do I know that somebody had really saw the nature? And Daniel, you can either confirm or scold me, but I say this factor of did we lose Daniel?
Yeah.
Oh, I only see him there. Okay. To me, I see this factor of leaping with joy is one of the indicators that we get down to that visceral, emotional, touching of the oneness of all, the oneness that is not two, not three. So to me, that this leaping with joy is really, even though it's kind of short, sweet, and right, not emphasized. To me, that is a very important point here. That they're not just leaping with joy at hearing the sounds and the flowers. The joy is the expression that they get it. We get it. We get what she's saying, and therefore we offer our resolve to preserve with her and always share together the realization. So that's to me the emphasis here. Here he comes again. Hey, Daniel, you're back. I just was mentioning, Daniel, something about this last phrase.
My internet came down for some reason. It looks
Right.
like electricity went off for a few
Interesting.
seconds.
Okay. Well, we're just wrapping up here with the last paragraph of this section. And I was highlighting this phrase here, this sentence. They leapt with joy immeasurable and then brought out their words of resolve to persevere with Srimala and to always share together the realization identical to the actual practice. So in addition to the point of its realization identical to the actual practice of all this, not just the talking about it. As I was just saying, this factor of they leapt with joy, to me, and I was going to say, you can confirm or you can scold me, but to me, this leaping with joy is an essential factor of Kensho, to see the nature that when we really have some kind of opening or peeking into our glimpse of Kensho, it is always associated, or there is always some sense of leaping with joy at the discovery. Whether we call it leaping, the joy of like returning home, or the joy of seeing my original face for the first time, there is always this aspect of leaping with the heart leaps with joy, and that's a very important.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that is very interesting, Gregory, and I've seen it a few times, people that have an apparent opening, and they're quite cleared in many ways, but there is no joy. And it's strange, and I said, well, I've told them, something's missing here, but it's like, it seems like I mean, I can see that it might not be like just incredible joyful, but it kind of like flatness. Oh yeah, it's just like, no, there's something not right there.
Right. To me, that's an indication of sort of like halfway through the Crystal Palace and not all the way through out the other side.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, something is definitely, it's hard sometimes, for me, it has been hard sometimes to see now because it's hard to tell, it's weird to tell people there's no joy, so there's something wrong.
Right. The story I put to that is that we have to go through the Crystal Palace, and in doing that, we get kind of totally burned up. But if we don't get all the way through the Crystal Palace and we come back out the door that we entered in, then that's what happens. Something didn't get all burned up. Something didn't get composted completely, and something is still missing because we haven't gone through all the way through it. So that's how I kind of.
I think it's basically there's still so much mind, so much brain involved there,
Absolutely, yes.
And it is satisfied. It gets to be satisfied. but there's no spark. There's no eyes that are luminous.
Right.
All right. Okay. Well.
So
great.
there we are. Again, we've gone 15 minutes over time, but anybody have any last, but we did get to the end of section 2. Section 3, as we see, it fits there all on one page. And so that part will be quick comparatively. And then we'll go into section 4, which is articulating the acceptance of the real Dharma.
We start at what Weymouth called deciding the cause.
Yes, that'll be where we start next time, where they have that, where they grouped part 3, section 3 with section 4. And again, to repeat myself, I grouped this section 3 with section 1 and 2 because in the entrustment, they are considered 3 praising sections, and the sections beginning with the word articulating begin with section 4. So that's why I put the break at section 4, not at section 3. But so there we are.
Okay.
Any final comments, questions, or?
No, I enjoyed it this time more than I've enjoyed it some other times. Yeah. Well, but
Well,
I
we're
mean,
getting more to the pith and the substance of it.
it was not a problem. It's just like, wow, so much stuff, It's like, but it's
So we maybe, hopefully we're not going through it too slow, but I really, this is me sharing,
it's good. No,
chewing how much I've chewed this up.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's been fun to digest with you. I think the thing that I enjoyed this time a lot was how meaty those the proclamations were, and also the chewing together on it really felt good to me. Those 2 things, I felt kind of challenged and stirred up and opened up in beautiful ways.
I'd like to say something that I've talked to you, Gregory, many times, and I just don't understand, man. I don't understand this thing about the Tathagata Garbha. I know what it means, but I don't understand it as a principle, as a philosophy that is different from the other ones. I just don't get it. I don't see the differences.
Well, we're going to get there.
And if the differences, they're so, I don't find the differences in my heart, in my body, in my interest, in my love, in my curiosity.
Well, I don't either, really. And I think, and by that I mean as a separate concept. And we're going to get to that because the Tathagata Garbha comes in at the end of section 5, and then it comes back in section 7. I think that's the order, but we'll get to that, and I don't, and that's part of my issue with both Diana Paul and the Waymans. The way that they have their introduction and footnotes and everything, they're telling the story of Queen Srimala's Sutra as if it's a Tathagata Garbha Sutra. And that's why I think they're wrong in doing that, because and this is why I want to emphasize that this is a one vehicle sutra, not a Tathagata Garbha Sutra. And so when we get to the sections that raise the Tathagata Garbha, I think you'll be able to see more in context why I tend to agree with you more that the Tathagata Garbha isn't such a big deal, even though there are people who made it, who want to make it a big deal.
Well, this other book that I forgot that I had it, and I gave it to you because it got too weird. And when I went back to India, I bought it again in Deer Park because
Which one?
I'd forgotten,
Oh yeah, that guy. Brian, that's Brian Brown, is that it?
Yeah, Brian Edward Brown.
Yeah.
The Buddha Nature, Study of Tathagata Garbha and Alaya Vijnana.
Right. And I actually I didn't complete it. I have so many things I think about and make notes about, but then don't ever write an essay summing them all up. I had a lot of issues with that book. Again, because he also turns Queen Srimala's sutra into a Tathagatagarbha sutra.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of margins in that book filled up with me saying, no, that he missed it, he didn't get it.
One thing that'll be very important, Gregory, for me anyway, is a succinct 1 or 2 paragraph, less than, as short as possible, explanation of why this is not a Tathagatagarbha Sutra and what it is not, because that's, I hear the word and
Right.
I think I know what it is, and I don't. So I don't want to take any more time tonight with that.
Yeah,
Right.
I know I have to jump too, but I would love that as well. And I'm also okay with letting it all wash over me and whatever flowers stick to me and burn my flesh or something, or whatever doesn't, I don't know. I love you all, and this was really nourishing for my spirit. Thank you, Gregory.
Okay,
Go.
just to give you the preview is there is a sentence coming up that will be the sentence to focus that question on, Carol. It's coming up, but it probably won't be next time, but the time after that, maybe.
Right.
Well, it's coming up though, but we have to get through the acceptance of the real Dharma, and then when we get to the end of the one vehicle section, it'll be right there to highlight the distinction.
Okay. All right.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Good night, y'all.
Good night.